Hey, what is going on, everybody? Welcome to the Super Lunch Bros podcast, episode number 71. I am Brendan. No UFC this weekend. We did have some PFL. We had some Bellator. I'll briefly cover those. I say cover. I'll go over some news from that. Talk about who actually won, that kind of thing. We do have a UFC coming up this weekend. You got Jared Cannonier taking on Calvin Gastelum. This is an important fight for the middleweight division. You got I went over this a little bit last week, but I figure we'll go into it a little bit more since we didn't have any UFC, and we'll just cover some UFC news this week since we don't have any immediate fights to recap. Anyway, and Jacare Souza retired, so we'll probably talk about that one too. That's pretty important. Before I get started, like and subscribe, all those things. If you like what I'm doing or like what we're doing, please tell your friends about it. We've done a couple one-offs with movie reviews, different fighter rankings. We talked. We haven't talked about politics or global, not economics. We haven't talked about relations, foreign relations or anything like that in a very long time. But if you're really interested in those things and you want us to, let me know, because I do have other people we can always bring on and talk about to kind of bring people back, maybe who have been on here before. All right, let's get started. All right, so this weekend we got Jared Cannonier taking on Calvin Gastelum. So I didn't make a pick, I don't believe, but we went over this for this weekend. I think I mentioned it. We got Calvin Gastelum, who I believe I think he's on a 2-fight skid. 2-fight or 3-fight? Because he did lose to... Because he lost to Till. He lost to... Oh, no. Sorry. No, he was on a 3-fight skid. Losing to Izzy, Darren Till, Jack Hermanson, then beating Ian Heinisch, and then losing to Robert Whittaker. Okay. Still, that being said, because of the people he's losing to and the caliber of opponents he's had in general, he's still ranked number 9 in the middleweight division. So beating him still means something. I still think he has, given the right circumstances, he could be champ at middleweight. I still want him to go down to welterweight. I mention that a lot because he was a really good welterweight, and I think he could do that. I really believe he could be champ at welterweight. He has a... I don't know if I might have mentioned he has the poison for Kamaru Usman, but he's just a really good matchup. It's a fun, interesting matchup at welterweight. Anyway, that's pie in the sky stuff. I don't think that's ever happening again unless something crazy happens and he wants to go on a diet. This weekend he's taking on number 3 in Jared Cannonier. So with a win, Calvin Gastelum just boosts his stock right back up, and he's back in the conversation for one win away from a title eliminator fight. All right, so 2 more wins gets him in that title shot again, or at least a title picture. And that's not unrealistic. That would be, I think, fair, and I think it would also be interesting to see him fight for a title. He's a smaller guy, but he holds weight decent. He carries his power all right. His cardio's good. He's got decent boxing, good takedowns, takedown defense. He's a very good all-around fighter. It's just he doesn't excel the way he did, the way I think he could at welterweight. And I know that's saying a lot because the guy's... he beat... Yeah, Johnny Hendricks because Hendricks missed weight. No, that was still welterweight. Yeah, so he knocks out Tim Kennedy, beats Vitor Belfort. Oh, he tested positive for marijuana. Get the hell out of here. He beats Vitor Belfort, loses to Chris Weidman in a really interesting fight, knocks out Michael Bisping, who just lost the title, but the fight before that, beats Jacare Souza in a split decision, loses a crazy fight for an he did fight for the belt, kind of. It was for the interim belt against Izzy, and it was a crazy one. Like, he could have won that fight if he won the 5th round. Loses a split decision to Darren Till. Gets submitted by Jack Hermanson. Beats Ian Heinisch and loses to Whitaker. So he's lost to former champ. And Jack Hermanson could be a title contender. Darren Till, former title contender at welterweight. Loses to Izzy, who was the champ, or is the champ. Michael Bisping, former champ. And loses to Chris Weidman, also former champ. Anyway, he's really good, and I just mean that I think at welterweight, he's just a destroyer. I don't think he lost to Tyron Woodley. I've made that very clear before, back in 2015, down in, I still remember that fight. Like, I think he beat Tyron Woodley. You know, it was a split decision. I don't think he lost it. You know, he did miss weight for that, so that sucks. But anyway, he knocks out Nate Marquardt. Or was that one, or he beat him up so bad they had to stop it? Then he lost a split decision to Neil Magny, which I don't know if I would say he lost that fight. Beats Johnny Hendricks, Tim Kennedy, and that's what I mean. Like, I think at welterweight, you could argue that he's like undefeated, that he won those split decisions, even though he missed weight. And I know I'm not a fan of that. I still want him to make weight. I need the guy to go back down to welterweight so we can see some interesting matchups. I really do. I think he could shake up the division. I really want him to lose some weight and get back down there. I think he's such a tough matchup for Covington, Burns, Usman, Luque, Thompson, Masvidal, Chiesa, Magny. We've seen that one already. Muhammad. Dude, he's a hard matchup for all of them. I don't know if a single one of those people has like something on him where like, oh yeah, he's gonna smoke. They're gonna smoke Gastelum. I don't think so, man. Yeah, he needs to go back down. He needs to go back down to welterweight. Okay. That's enough for that one. I'm picking. This has Gastelum win all over it. Jared Cannonier, if he can't get something going and he doesn't like break people, he tends to just coast and try to outpoint. I think Gastelum can get it done. I don't know if he's going to get a finish, but I think he could get a decision, or we could see like a split decision loss against him again. That would suck. But anyway, I really do think he can still fight for a title, whether it be at middleweight or welterweight. Maybe 3 more wins, it might take him to get a title shot. I still, if he got a win now, dropped down to welterweight, took on someone in the top 10, he can get a win. So 2 wins away from a title shot at welterweight, technically. I'd like to see that. I really would. I think he's a great fighter. And I want to see him get another shot at the title before he calls it quits. I know he's not the oldest person. I get it. I'm just saying, like, if you follow MMA and you know how careers go, it's not usually like, oh, someone goes on a 4-fight skid, wins a couple, and then their career's hunky-dory after that. It's usually up and down, and they end up being like a middling contender and then never getting a title shot because more interesting people jump over them. Okay, anyway. Yeah, I'll take Gastelum. 60-40. 65-35. That's not how this works. Let's call it 60-40. Yeah. Anyway, all right. We have Clay Guida fighting Mark Madsen. Okay. Guida has been in the UFC since they brought the division over. I'm almost positive. Yeah, he was in WEC back in 2006. And then, yeah, the UFC. UFC 64 was his UFC debut back in 2006. 15 years he's been fighting in the UFC. October 14th, actually. So, yep, 15 years he's been in the UFC. Just the names on this guy's record, it's just a who's who of MMA from the aughts and the tens and teens. It really is. Like it's crazy to see all these names on one list, and it's all just on his Wikipedia page. But anywho, all right. So let's look at the more recent history, shall we? Let's go back to 2017. Yeah, I think that's relevant, right? That's still relevant now. A lot of people say in the last 4 years he's blah blah blah. So you can say 5 years, but that doesn't help him in this case. So let's just say 4. So Eric Koch, I don't know. Eric Koch, he wins, gets a decision, knocks out Joe Lozon in a fun fight in 2017. Then he loses via submission to Charles Oliveira. Doesn't look so bad now, does it? With Charles being the champ. Beats BJ Penn. We don't have to talk about that one. Gets submitted by Jim Miller. Loses a frustrating decision to Bobby Green last year. And then early this year, he beat Michael Johnson via decision. So he's really... it's easy just to dismiss him and say, oh, it's fun. But with his name recognition, like, I could see him being ranked again. As a featherweight, I could see him being ranked again. That's what's crazy. I don't know how many of these people in the top 15 he beats, but that's kind of what he said. He really wants to keep challenging and keep moving forward and fighting up the ranks. And I think he's crazy. But hey, I'll root for anybody from right around my neck of the woods. He is 39 years old, though, and that usually doesn't bode well for the lighter weight classes. Okay. I'm picking Guida. I just want it. I'm just going to try and will it into existence. You got Parker Porter versus Chase Sherman. Heavyweights. I don't think this fight means anything. Mana Martinez versus Trevin Jones. One of those guys has a black and white photo, so that don't mean much, does it? Vince Pichel, Austin Hubbard, Alexander Pantoja versus Brandon Royval. We talked about that. Yeah, so that's the one. The Pantoja versus Royval. That's my pick for fight of the night. And two very exciting flyweights. Brandon Royval, having a real back and forth with the current champ in Brandon Moreno. He hits hard. He's got weird, like he beat Kai Kara France when France had him kind of like rocked real bad, and he was like on squirrely legs. He's a tough dude, and he came into the UFC. He's the one who cried about, getting a win, saying like, I can do better than this, and like he's gonna have to go back to work because he doesn't. You take it or leave it. If you like that story or not, I don't know, but I think he's a fun guy, fun fighter, and he's like an action fighter. That's for damn sure. I think that's a fun fight to watch and to watch out for. So if you're trying to just pick and choose which fights you're trying to see, I think that's a pretty good lock for an exciting fight. So I would watch at least the opening fight in the main card, and then the co-main and the main. The other ones, you can drift in and out or put it on in the background. Austin Ling, I won't. I'll watch them all. There's Luis Saldana, Brian Kelleher, coming on hard times. Like, I want to say he's lost 2 in a row. But he had something promising going. Yeah, he lost to Ricky Simon. Yeah, see, that's not hard times. That's a bit of an exaggeration here. Lurie Alcantara loses to Marlon Vera. Cheeto, yeah. He lost to Cheeto. Damian Stasic. He beat Henan Barao. That doesn't mean much. He got knocked out by John Lineker. That sucks. Submitted by Montel Jackson. Submits Odie Osborne, who just lost this past weekend. Knocks out Hunter Azure, which was a great knockout. Loses a decision to Cody Stamann. So he just, like, sometimes he just can't get it going, right? And against Cody Stamann and Ricky Simon, I think that's kind of what was happening. Yeah, he seems to lose. Well, no. Man, he's got so many freaking, like, there's not a lot of decisions on his record. No. He's got he's 22 wins. 10 of them are submission, 8 of them are knockouts. He's only lost once by knockout. He's been submitted 6 times, and he's lost 5 decisions. So it's like almost 50-50. All right, with decisions and submissions. If it goes to decision, he's also 50-50. So it's like knockouts, though. Like he's a fun fighter to watch. I like him, and plus he's fun on Twitter. So, Bay Malecki, Nunez, no, we'll talk about those if something exciting happens. Result, Robert, Okay, that's enough. All right, so real quick, Ray Cooper the third just destroyed Roy McDonald. He really did. Just had him beat everywhere. His grappling was way better. Rory just doesn't look the same anymore. I don't know if it's age or, the fact that he's become a lot more religious lately, and he's, it's changed his outlook on life and how he views fighting, right? Not becoming, like, not a savage so much anymore. For better or for worse, he's just a different fighter. I think it's for the worse. He hasn't looked the same since he went through all that stuff. Plus, I think his nose is still messed up from when he fought Robbie Lawler. And then that's the one of note for me. And then in Bellator, Gegard Mousasi retains his belt. I mean, it doesn't mean much anymore. He's not really fighting. And plus, Rafael Lovato Jr. beat him and was forced to kind of retire because of his brain disorder that he has. And he can't get sanctioned anywhere. So, like, Gegard Mousasi never got to win back, so the lineal title is kind of gone. Jeez, puppy. Good grief. So, yeah. Anyway, those are those fights. That's all the news, or all that stuff I want to talk about. All right, this is something I wanted to touch on here. All right, let's put his thing over here. So, Jacare Souza is retired this weekend. So let's. I'm more familiar with his MMA escapades. Okay, I'm not as familiar with his grappling accomplishments. Although, if you pull up Wikipedia, there's a lot of gold in there. So, in the World Jiu-Jitsu Championship, I'm just going to read them right off of Wikipedia. I think it is cool, and obviously, I've heard this. And if you're familiar with him in MMA, you've heard it said, like, he's one of the best jiu-jitsu practitioners currently in MMA. And has been for a long time. So, in 2001, he won the absolute and the 82-kilogram World Jiu-Jitsu Championship. He got silver in 2002 in the absolute, but he won gold in the 88. Then he won... In 2003, he won gold in both. In 2004, he won gold in absolute, but silver in his division. And then in 2005, won gold in both. And then the ADCC, he won silver in 2003 and 5, gold in 2005, his weight class, and then gold in 2009 and silver in 2011. This guy is a prodigious medal collector in grappling. I think that's important to touch on, but I'm not as familiar with it. I was not paying attention to jiu-jitsu in 2001, nor was I paying jiu-jitsu in 2003. So I don't have a lot of experience with his stuff in grappling. All I know him from mostly is the UFC from when he came over, because when he was in Strikeforce, I was in a lot of, I think I was on deployment a lot, and then I just came home from the military, so I had a lot of stuff going on in my life, and I wasn't into MMA at that time. But this dude was an absolute monster. Okay, he lost his first MMA fight back in 2003, and then didn't lose again until 2008 when he lost to Gegard Mousasi via upkick in Dream 6, which I would say is a fluky win for Gegard Mousasi. And we can explain that later. But that was for the Dream Middleweight Championship. He fought for the Middleweight Championship again against Jason Miller. No contest due to a cut. Then here comes his Strikeforce reign. Beats Matt Lindland. Joey Villasenor beats Tim Kennedy. Robbie Lawler. Loses. So he won the title against Tim Kennedy, defended against Robbie Lawler, and then loses it to Luke Rockhold. Then he goes on another tear. Bristol Morunde, this is still in Strikeforce, knocks out Derek Brunson, submits Ed Herman, submits Chris Camozzi. Back at that time in 2013, that was an accomplishment. Actually, that was his first fight in the UFC, and I do remember that one. And then he knocks out Yushin Okami. Francis Carmont is a decision. He submits Gegard Mousasi in 2014. Decisively, I might add. It looked like Mousasi didn't know what he was doing. Right? He looked like a fish out of water, looked terrible, and he just was something else. Then he fights Chris Camozzi again and submits him again. Then, at UFC 194, the thing that I believe derailed his entire UFC career. Yoel Romero. I was actually mentioning this before to somebody, and there's an interesting universe in which that fight, so it was a split decision loss to Yoel Romero, and I've mentioned this fight before in passing, but we can talk about it a little more here. There was one big shot in that entire fight during one round that gave Yoel an advantage. Other than that, Yoel looked like how he always does. Less active, doesn't really land a ton of strikes, and Jacare just looked better. I had it 2-1 for Jacare. Imagine this, where he goes this is just UFC fights, okay? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 fights in a row. Wins 5 fights in a row, and then 6 fights in a row and beats Yoel Romero. You don't think he's getting a title shot? And this is 2015. So at that time, it was Chris Weidman who was the champ, who he fought later and beat. He ended up knocking him out. That being said, Chris Weidman was beating him up until that point, so who knows how the championship fight could have gone. But I do believe Jacare had what it took to beat Chris Weidman. We're in in this bizarro world. He beats Chris Weidman. He loses to Luke Rockhold, or he could have beat Luke Rockhold, either way. And then let's say he's still champ, right? Let's say he does defend against Luke Rockhold, or maybe because, their history, they don't fight again. I don't know. Luke has a weird way of not fighting and doing stuff. It's hard to tell, and now we're into super speculation. So let's say he wins. he doesn't lose to Michael Bisping. There's no way on earth that Jacare loses to Michael Bisping. So Michael Bisping is never champ, which means GSP never comes back. Robert Whittaker could still beat Jacare. We'll get to that later, which was a huge surprise at the time. But in this bizarro world, Michael Bisping is never champ, which means GSP doesn't come back. We don't have GSP coming back to do that. There's not a lot of hype over the division. Oh, my God. He would still probably lose to Whittaker. And then I think things would have gone back. But imagine that, where GSP's record never has him coming up to middleweight, and Bisping retires without ever getting the belt. I don't think that diminishes what he did, but I think it's interesting to talk about. Also, Dan Henderson, I mean, he didn't have the beef with him, so I don't know. Dan Henderson might never have got that last title shot. There's a lot of things. I know this is stupid because it's all what if, but I really do believe Yoel Romero is the reason why. That fluke, and it's not even him. I think it was a bad decision. Bad judging is the reason why he was never champion in the UFC. You can say all the things you want, but let's look at his record after that. So he beats Vitor Belfort. He knocks out Vitor Belfort, submits Tim Bosch. And then this is where I think the Jacare that existed in this title contention, title contendership, it kind of goes away. Because this is when he lost to Robert Whittaker. All right. So if you weren't a fan back then, I mean, that might not make a difference to you. This might not make a difference to you at all, now that I think about it. So if you weren't a fan back then, this probably means nothing. But if you were, you remember Robert Whittaker was supposed to lose that fight. There was nobody, including myself, who thought he was going to win. This was Jacare, who just knocked out Vitor Belfort, submitted Tim Bosch, and he was going to beat Robert Whittaker and get that title shot. Right? This is what was going to happen. And Robert Whittaker said, I don't think so. Went in there and knocked him out. And I think this is where it really ended. Now, you could say it ended later, but I think this was it. This was the moment where Jacare was never going to get a title shot ever again. And I know that's me saying this in the future, so hindsight, 2020, but even at the time, I do remember this distinctly, thinking, oh, he's done. Not that he couldn't fight anymore, not that he couldn't beat some of the top 5, definitely top 10 guys in the world. I just knew that most likely he's never getting a title shot. And at the time, it was a different reason than it is now. But at the time, it was like, wow, he lost to Robert Whittaker? There's no way. So at that time, I was like, oh, he lost to him. Then he has a comeback win, knocks out Derek Brunson. But then he loses a decision to Calvin Gastelum. And then he knocks out Chris Weidman in a fight he was losing. So in the fight against Calvin, I was like, okay. Because he knocks out Derek Brunson, and Derek Brunson's always been a streaky fighter, and he's put together a good streak as of late, but at the time, it was more like a ups and downs type of Derek Brunson. I think this was fine, but then when he fought Calvin Gastelum, and even if he won that fight, it was so close. You're like, does he really have what it takes to be a champion anymore? And then he lost most of the fight to Chris Weidman. And I was like, okay, well, he got the win, but, he's not pulling that off ever again. Like he's not ever again. Sorry. Like the chances of him pulling off like a late knockout like that, I don't think so. Then he loses a decision to Jack Hermanson, and this really solidified it. And I'm like, okay, clearly he doesn't have what it takes anymore. Loses a split decision to Jan Blachowicz at light heavyweight. And then he went, for some reason, all the middleweights were like, let's go test out light heavyweight because it's so easy up there. And they all fought like Jan and Reyes, who ended up being the two champs, or fighting for the championship, the two best fighters. And then he got knocked out by Kevin Holland from those weird strikes on the ground by like Kevin Holland. That was a really cool knockout for him, so I'm not complaining about it. It's just more of the same, you know. Jacare doesn't look the same anymore. And then the icing on the cake was getting his arm broken by Andre Muniz. And that's called a technical submission. So, what do you make of his career? And like, first of all, I'm salty about it. I think he could have been champ, should have had the opportunity a long time ago. I mean, look at this. That was back in 2015. That bullshit split decision loss to Yoel Romero. This is 2015, 6 years ago. 6 years in MMA is an eternity. The dude back then was 35. That's not young. But a 41-year-old Jacare is nowhere near what a 35-year-old Jacare was, right? And on top of that, he was at the point where if he won that fight, he's getting a title shot. And he could have been champ for a couple fights. Even if he was only for once, and he ends up losing it to Luke Rockhold, and then the rest of the division goes on the way it has, and no other things were changed except he got the belt from Chris Weidman first. I still think that's like a stain on his record. 6 fights in a row it would have been. 6 fights in a row. And he would have had that title shot. I think he deserved the title shot anyway, but there was that whole business and Luke and Chris Weidman that had to settle on all that stuff. Oh, wait, that was on the same card as Chris Weidman and Luke Rockhold. Yes. But anyway, I do think he should have been champ. I really do. And it's unfortunate that he never got the opportunity to fight for the belt. I mean, it sucks. I think he's one of the best fighters ever to grace the octagon, to grace the cage. It's just a shame that more people don't recognize his greatness because he was kind of relegated to mediocrity in the past 5 years because of one decision. Right? Even if he was the former champ, I mean, look at Cody Garbrandt. I know the UFC has different motives for him, but look at Cody Garbrandt. The dude was champ for 1 minute. Right? He got the belt and then immediately got knocked out. And they gave him an immediate rematch. Got knocked out again. Then he gets knocked out another time. Knocks out a guy and then loses a decision. And they're still trying to push him as a contender. And he had the belt for 5 minutes. I know I said 1 minute, but 5 minutes he had the belt for. I mean, technically, if you really want to think about it, he had the belt for probably like 7 or 8 minutes. Because up until getting knocked out by TJ, he was a champion. So, of active ring time, he was champ for like 8 minutes. I know that's a silly thing to say, but I'm just being silly. I don't know. It's unfortunate. I know I'm kind of just wallowing and like circling here, but you think about Souza and like the monster he was 5 or 6 years ago. I mean, more power to Robert Whitaker. Robert Whitaker went in there and just like wiped the floor with him 5 years ago, 4 years ago. So, nothing. I don't take anything away from him. I think Robert Whitaker, as we know him today, beats Jacare at the time that he beat him. So whether he had the belt or he didn't have the belt, he's beating Jacare. So that's gonna happen. It's just unfortunate, I really. This is another reason I never liked Yoel Romero. Like, he ruined a lot of. Like, he was involved in a lot of situations that prevented other fighters from getting title shots. And there was controversy around a lot of them. And when there wasn't controversy, he flat out misses weight. Right? Or doesn't do anything. It's just all of these opportunities these other people had, and what did he bring? Like, there's a reason why the UFC let him go. Right? He's taken out contenders who take the game seriously and make weight and fight their heart out every time they're in there and work. They don't just show a cool highlight reel of them working out and then come in and stand still for 45 seconds. Like, other fighters don't do that. And because of him and the shitty judging, it's another thing losing to a fighter. Like, anybody can lose on any given night to anybody. Like, it can happen. But in this situation, we're dealing with, like, legacy, monetary compensation. Just, like, the career implications. And the amount of love that Yoel Romero has got versus someone who I think deserves it more in Jacare is absolutely ridiculous. With just as marred or sketchy a record. As I would say worse, because failing to make weight, failing to try, winning decisions that he didn't deserve is, like I said, that's just unfortunate. Anyway, let's stop wallowing in sadness here. Congrats on an amazing career. Really was. Former Strikeforce middleweight champion, one of the best jiu-jitsu players ever to be in MMA, and is successful one at that. Just a nightmare and a terrifying man on the ground. And I'm glad he hung it up when he did. He never really turned into like a shell of himself. Yeah, he wasn't great the last couple fights, but he didn't look like he didn't belong in there. It looked like maybe he was a little off, but we're not talking about BJ Penn or these aging fighters who don't age gracefully. All right. Okay, let's talk about some other UFC news that I thought was interesting. Jose Aldo was talking about... I'll try and cover this one because a real MMA fighter, like an MMA fighter who can actually throw hands, is going to be taking on one of the Paul brothers and Tyron Woodley. I mean, if you listen to me before, you know my feelings on Tyron Woodley. Not the biggest fan of his and his UFC career and how it played out. And his attitude, I think, was a big part of that. Just being a sourpuss in general. I'm not saying he was wronged, all right? That's not, or wasn't wronged. I'm not saying that he wasn't in the right, to have an attitude or to be confrontational or adversarial. He absolutely had the right to do that, and he was probably on the correct side. But, you can't do those things and come off like a giant baby and like expect me to like you. Anyway, I'm rooting for him to knock Jake Paul the fuck out. I really am. That's happening later this month, I believe, on the 29th. Given that news and all the hype around it, Jose Aldo is talking about like how he doesn't ever see himself fighting a YouTuber in boxing. Like, great. I mean, the man probably has enough money, and he owns a couple restaurants, or at least one restaurant in Brazil, and I'm pretty sure he's got his life taken care of. He doesn't need the money, I guess, so he doesn't have to do it. There's nothing to get here. There's a lot of money in it. It's not a real it's not a real challenge for a properly trained striker. Could he beat him? Yeah. Jake Paul could beat Tyron Woodley. I don't want it to happen. But, there's a world in which that happens, where Tyron Woodley gasses out, doesn't get Jake Paul out of there, and now gets kind of like touched up and tuned up. Like, look at his last couple of performances. His last performance in the octagon was more indicative of Tyron Woodley of like 8 years ago, 7 years ago. But he's going into a new sport. Boxing is different. There's slightly different training regimens and different techniques, obviously, and there's a different type of cardio you need for a 3-minute round. Anyway, it's a real professional fight. Let's see what happens. We'll talk about that more when it comes up. I just thought it was interesting that Jose Aldo was like, "Yeah, I don't get it." I mean, what's not to get, man? If someone paid you $10 million to go punch a wall on TV, would you? Why not? It's not even like exploitation. It's just an easy payday. Yeah, Ben Askren went in there and got knocked out. Okay. I bet you he made more money in that fight than he did in his, 2 or 3 UFC fights that he had? 3 UFC fights? I mean, it is what it is. It's just it's just how it works, man. I'm not like the UFC fighters. Like, how are they getting paid more? Because they're popular. They had fame and popularity well before they started doing this stuff. Before they started going into combat sports, right? Or pseudo combat sports, whatever you want to call it. They had a built-in fan base. It's like Brock Lesnar. Brock Lesnar wasn't famous because he was an excellent wrestler in college. 198-2 or whatever his record was or whatever. Right? It's not because he was an excellent wrestler or an athlete. No one knew who he was. Tried out for the Vikings. Nobody knew who this guy was. Nobody cared. Because of that. It was because he was a professional wrestler. He had a built-in fan base from the WWF and the WWE, which became the WWE. And he was a famous wrestler with a built-in fan base. That's why he got paid. That's why he was in big fights. That's why he got a title shot 3 fights into his career. People want to talk about Cyril Gane, like unprecedented, just starting his career. Like, Brock Lesnar did this shit. All right, I would argue that Cyril Gane is a better fighter than Brock Lesnar, more complete. But he's not breaking new ground here. In a relatively modern era, I would argue, Brock Lesnar did this already. And I said this in my Mount Rushmore of heavyweights, like, Brock Lesnar's up there. He did this. He built the modern UFC. Brock Lesnar is the reason we have Conor McGregor's popularity. He's the reason we have Ronda Rousey. He brought that initial big expansion of random eyes to the UFC. Not the initial one, but the modern set. He was the first one, the blockbuster paydays, right? The guy getting opportunities he might not necessarily have earned in the UFC, but taking full advantage of them when he was given them. So Cyril Gane doing what he's done in the past couple of years, more power to him. I think it's amazing. I think he's a very good fighter. But Brock Lesnar did this already. And you want to talk about, like, how come these heavyweights aren't getting paid like Brock Lesnar? How come they're not getting paid like Jake Paul? How come they're not getting paid like these random people play fighting? It's because nobody cares about you compared to that. In the grand scheme of things, nobody knows who you are. Francis Ngannou is one of the best fighters on the planet. And as a whole, the world, the 7-8 billion people that live on it, I'm just being silly here, but nobody knows who he is. More people watch stupid videos on the internet. More people are familiar with Disney, the Paul brothers. More people know who they are. That's why more people are willing to pay to see him. That's why. It's a simple answer. This isn't some sort of mathematical, there's no calculations here. There's no statistical analysis needed. I don't need to run through economical, economics. Sorry, stumbling over my words a little bit. But, you don't need to go into economics and, supply and demand in order to tell you why UFC fighters on a whole get paid less than 3 popular individuals. 4 popular individuals, if you want to throw Conor in there. Brock, Conor, Jake, and Logan, right? Those guys get paid more because they're popular. People know who they are. People pay to see them fight. People pay to see them lose. People pay to see them talk shit. That's what it is. There's lots of ways to build up popularity. Winning in the UFC is a long road to popularity. Calling your wins, winning in spectacular fashion, being animated in public and in conferences, press conferences, anytime you're on camera, that's a faster way to hijack the narrative around you and make it be number one, right? Make that narrative, the Francis Ngannou narrative, be the most popular thing. And that's why. Dude, the UFC pushed Francis Ngannou hard. Real hard. You don't remember that? I like how Ngannou seems to have forgotten the opportunities he was given by the UFC. Thrown into a title shot after what? He had 3 wins or 4 wins. I'm not saying he necessarily didn't deserve it, but you're telling me the UFC didn't have something to do with it? Oh no, he had more. My bad. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, he had 6 wins in the UFC. So he beat Curtis Blades via doctor stoppage. Bojan Mahadjovac, that guy's not in the UFC. That guy can't be in the UFC anymore. That guy's not in the UFC anymore. That guy's not in the UFC anymore. Anthony Hamilton. Andrei Arlovski's 1,000 years old. So he beat Curtis Blades, Andrei Arlovski, and Alistair Overeem, and got a title shot. So yes, there are other people in there. You remember Anthony Hamilton? Not much to look at there. Bojan Mihajlovic. No, there's no way. And Luis Henrique. Also no. And then he got a title shot. And remember, all the narrative was around him and how he's going to go in there and how he hits hard and how he's the future of the division and blah, 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 blah. And Stipe blew his doors off. And then he had the worst fight in UFC history with Derek Lewis. Then he got some more wins. Curtis Blades, Cain Velasquez, Junior Dos Santos, Jairzinho Rosenstruck. These are good wins. And then he won the belt. Right? He's a great fighter, don't get me wrong. But the UFC was pushing him hard. He was pushing him hard to be in the limelight. Anyway, I'm excited for Cyril Gane versus Francis Ngannou. That's a fun one. Yeah. I mean, oh yeah, from the Olympics, the Gable Steveson guy. He's the big wrestler from the U.S. who got the gold. An incredible finish, by the way. 0 seconds left. Just working and working and working and gets a takedown. Dude, I think there was, 20 seconds left or 13 seconds left. And he was down by 3 points. And he got 2 takedowns, and the last one being like milliseconds before time ran out for the gold fucking medal. Gable Steveson is a beast. Really athletic guy, great wrestler. Who knows what his hands look like? Can't tell you. He can do flips and shit, which is pretty cool. Be interesting to see how he would stack up with people. I don't want to see him fight in the UFC. I want to see him train, maybe get a couple of amateur fights under his belt to figure out how he fits into, MMA in general. Like, what is his strategy? Find a camp to work with, and then, a year or two from now, maybe 3, working his way to the UFC and then jumping in. I don't want to see him dive into the deep end and be, like, smoked by a veteran and then be like, this sucks and I don't want to do this anymore. I mean, I'm sure he could beat a lot of fighters in the UFC, but he could also lose to a lot of fighters, so I don't want to see any of that stuff. Anyway, I think that's about it. All right. Thank you for sticking with me. We see some fights this weekend. We'll have something to talk about next weekend. What else we got? That's pretty much it. Thank you so much again. If you haven't already, please please subscribe to the channel. If you like what we're doing, I really appreciate that. Also, if you think somebody else would be interested in the UFC talk and the things that we talk about, let them know. Word of mouth is awesome. Please comment down below. Talk about the fights. Talk about UFC news. Reach out on Twitter, at Super Lunch Bros on Twitter. Yeah, I'm excited for this weekend. Excited for another UFC, and this weekend was a little slow. It's funny to see all the tweets from people like just people sitting on a bench like Saturdays with no UFC. But anywho, all right. Be good to everybody. Be good to each other. Love y'all.